Iran alleges it struck one of the most secretive underground facilities in Israel, a wartime bunker beneath the military headquarters in central Tel Aviv, the same compound where someone like Netanyahu would be taken to ride out a war. In response, Israeli authorities sealed the area, blocked the cameras, and refused to make a comment. That bunker is actual. It was constructed with American money, American engineers, and enough electromagnetic shielding to keep operating if everything above ground goes dark. In the next couple of minutes, I'll reveal what actually occurred, and you'll see why Israel wants it to stay concealed. Quick, before we proceed, thanks a lot for tuning in. Your support is what keeps this show going, and I appreciate you watching. As always, please make sure you're subscribed and like the video so more people get to see this. Now, let's get to it. We are now past day 10. Over 500 missiles and 2,000 drones have been launched, and the IRGC has been naming its targets publicly. They listed 27 U.S. bases. They listed Ben Gurion Airport. They alleged they knocked out 777 American and Israeli radar systems. But the target that counts most is the one sitting at the center of Tel Aviv, the military headquarters at HaKirya. Because what sits beneath that compound is what this entire story is genuinely about. Most people think Israel's military headquarters is a conventional above-ground compound with some reinforced shelters below it. In reality, the HaKirya district conceals a layered network of underground command bunkers that Israel has been constructing and expanding for decades. There are at least 2 confirmed installations you should understand. The first is designated Site 8111, which sits somewhere beneath the center of Tel Aviv. According to reports, this site is a roughly 6,000-meter electromagnetically shielded intelligence center. It was designed to survive electronic warfare attacks and maintain communications even if everything above ground goes dark. The second installation is called the Fortress of Zion. This is a newer, deeper Israeli military command post built directly beneath the headquarters in central Tel Aviv. The New York Times was given access and described a nerve center where roughly 70 people sat at multiple levels facing wall-mounted screens tracking live strikes. During active conflict, thousands of soldiers worked there around the clock. This is what the IRGC is talking about when it references underground command infrastructure in Tel Aviv. This is what Iranian missiles have been aimed at. Now, here is where we come back to the precedent that makes the current allegations credible, or at least worth investigating seriously. During the 2025 12-day war between Iran and Israel in June, a conflict that killed 28 Israelis and hospitalized over 3,000, Iranian ballistic missiles struck the North Tower of the Vinci apartment complex. The entire impact zone was sealed. No cameras were allowed. The Jerusalem Post later reported that the missile landed, in their words, a stone's throw from Netanyahu's office, which at the time was known as Building 2222. Weeks after that war ended, the Prime Minister's office began undergoing renovations. The rumor, which has never been confirmed or denied by Israeli officials, is that the building sustained damage in the strike. To this day, Google Maps blurs the satellite imagery over that section of Tel Aviv. On Leonardo da Vinci Street, directly in front of the towers, Google does not offer Street View. Russia's Yandex Maps does the same thing, censoring both imagery and location data for the Da Vinci complex. France 2444 conducted an analysis and concluded that Israeli media coverage of the Da Vinci strike had likely been deliberately delayed. Haaretz waited a full 2 weeks before publishing anything about the hit, even though photos had already circulated online. So Iran targeted this exact area once before. The damage was sealed off. The media was blocked. The satellite data is still censored. And now, in March 2026, the IRGC is alleging it struck the same zone again. We will come back to the question of what that means for Israel's ability to protect its deepest command layer. But first, you need to understand the scale of what has been raining down on central Israel over the past 10 days. On day 1, approximately 90 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel. Day 2, around 60. After that, roughly 20 per day, arriving in smaller but more frequent volleys. The pattern has changed. The individual salvos have gotten smaller, but the weapons themselves have gotten bigger and more destructive. By March 5th, a military source told Iran's Fars news agency that the country had launched more than 500 ballistic and cruise missiles and over 2,000 drones. Iran alleges 40% of that firepower was aimed at Israel and 60% at American positions across the region. On the opening night, a complete Iranian ballistic missile, a full warhead carrying several hundred kilograms of explosives, struck directly beside a Tel Aviv apartment building. And on the 1st of March, the deadliest single strike of the war so far struck Beit Shemesh. A missile carrying roughly 500 kilograms of explosives collapsed an underground civilian bomb shelter that was accessible by 2 flights of stairs. 9 people were killed. Investigators later concluded that even a fully compliant shelter would not have survived a direct hit of that force. The interceptor that was fired at that missile missed. No mechanical failure was found. The system engaged, it just did not connect. That detail counts because it gets at the core debate running underneath all of this. The White House alleges that Iranian ballistic missile strikes dropped by 90% between day 1 and day 6, crediting American and Israeli operations against Iranian mobile launchers inside the country. But even with that reduction, missiles are still breaking through. As of March 8th, 4 confirmed major impacts have struck the Israeli home front: Tel Aviv, Beit Shemesh, Beersheba, central Israel. Since the war began, 1,619 Israelis have been hospitalized. 87 remain in hospital beds. 4 are in critical condition. 10 Israeli civilians have been killed. Most people assume Israel's multi-layered air defense network is functioning at near total effectiveness. In reality, the fact that a K-bar Shekon 444 cluster warhead can land in central Tel Aviv and scatter submunitions across a 5-kilometer radius tells a very different operational story. That missile, also designated K-Bear, is the most destructive confirmed weapon in Iran's ballistic inventory. It was first unveiled in May 2023. It flies roughly 2,000 kilometers. It carries a warhead of approximately 1,500 kilograms. And its cluster configuration opens at about 7-kilometer altitude, releasing around 20 individual submunitions, each carrying about 2.5 kilograms of explosive across a massive dispersal zone. And that dispersal pattern is what transforms a single missile from a pinpoint threat into an area saturation weapon. For a densely built zone like the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, that changes the defensive math entirely. The IRGC confirmed it deployed this weapon during what it called the 19th 9/9 wave of Operation True Promise, targeting central Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport, and the 27th Air Base of the Israeli Air Force, with warheads weighing 1,000 kilograms. Israel disputed most of this, insisting its defenses intercepted every overnight missile, though it did acknowledge one morning strike that struck open ground in a central town. Firefighters responded to 2 main impact zones in central Israel where cluster munitions had scattered. A first responder described finding a man in his 40s lying on the grass with a severe shrapnel wound. This is the weapon that makes underground bunker targeting relevant. A conventional warhead needs a direct hit to threaten a buried facility. A cluster warhead turns the entire surface above that facility into a kill zone, shredding ventilation systems, communications arrays, and access points. And if those submunitions are landing within the HaKirya footprint, the question is no longer whether they reached the neighborhood, it is whether they reached the depth. Now, towards the end here, I want to reveal the mirror image that both governments are pretending does not exist. Because while Iran is alleging to strike Israel's underground command structure, Israel carried out the verified version of that exact operation against Tehran. On March 6th, approximately 50 Israeli Air Force fighter jets dropped around 100 bombs on the underground bunker of Ali Khamenei beneath the leadership compound in central Tehran. The IDF announced total destruction of the facility. The bunker extended beneath multiple city streets and contained meeting rooms, entry points, and command chambers used by senior Iranian officials. Even after Khamenei's assassination on the first day of the war, Israel's Unit 8200 and Unit 9900, its signals and visual intelligence branches, spent years mapping every corridor of that facility before the strike was ordered. The footage was released publicly. The confirmation was explicit. Iran has produced no equivalent evidence for its alleged strike on Israeli underground infrastructure. But the absence of proof is not the same as the absence of an event. Not when the impact area was sealed. Not when the satellite imagery is still blurred. Not when the same location was struck in June 2025 and the media was physically prevented from documenting it. Both governments are engaged in the same operation, hunting the other side's buried command architecture. One side showed its hand, the other sealed the evidence. The broader math of this conflict keeps accelerating. Crude oil has crossed $115 a barrel, a direct consequence of disrupted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz and damaged Gulf state energy infrastructure. More than 1,300 Iranian civilians are confirmed dead, including 194 children, according to the human rights activists' news agency. 7 American service members have been killed across the Middle East. The United States has sunk more than 30 Iranian naval vessels, declaring Iran's navy combatant effective. The White House states it needs 4 to 6 weeks to accomplish its stated objectives. Hezbollah has opened fire from Lebanon, launching barrages at Israeli territory and clashing with Israeli ground forces near the border town of Metula. The Islamic resistance in Iraq has joined the offensive with its own drone and missile strikes. And on March 8, 2026, Iran installed Mojtaba Khamenei, the dead supreme leader's own son, as his replacement. The IRGC and Iran's entire senior leadership immediately pledged allegiance to him. That last detail is not a footnote. It is the variable that determines whether Iran's missile campaign can sustain coherence under fire. Iran just handed wartime command to a man who has never held public office or a formal military title. He inherits a war his father did not start, and a military apparatus that has already burned through a significant share of its ballistic stockpile. Israeli intelligence estimates suggest more than 3,000 Iranian military personnel have been killed since the opening strikes. Whether Mojtaba Khamenei can maintain targeting discipline, logistical rhythm, and strategic direction under sustained American and Israeli bombardment is the open question that every defense ministry on Earth is watching right now. The sealed streets, the censored maps, the media blackouts, and a second straight war with Iranian missiles landing within the footprint of the most classified command facility in the country all point in one direction. Neither side has defined what the end of this war looks like. Neither side can verify what the other side is hiding beneath the rubble. And with Mojtaba Khamenei now holding the codes, the question is no longer whether this escalates. It is whether anyone left in either capital has a plan for what comes after it does. The strategic calculations reveal deeper vulnerabilities on both sides. Israel's underground command infrastructure represents decades of investment and planning. Every command bunker, every shielded communications hub, every buried control room was designed to survive conventional bombardment and maintain operational continuity during sustained conflict. But the emergence of cluster warheads, capable of saturating entire surface areas above these facilities, introduces a variable Israeli planners did not anticipate when most of these installations were constructed. Ventilation shafts, antenna arrays, emergency exits, all the surface infrastructure that keeps buried command centers functional becomes exposed to area saturation munitions that do not require direct hits to inflict critical damage. Meanwhile, Iran faces its own command continuity crisis. The installation of Mojtaba Khamenei as supreme leader under active warfare conditions creates unprecedented uncertainty within the IRGC command structure. Military operations require institutional knowledge, established communication protocols, and trusted relationships between commanders at multiple levels. Iran's missile campaign has sustained remarkably consistent targeting discipline across 10 days of operations. Each wave has struck specific military installations, energy infrastructure, and command facilities with precision that suggests centralized planning and coordinated intelligence. 80%. 0%. Whether that operational coherence can survive leadership transition during active combat remains the critical unknown. Historical precedent suggests that command structures under fire during succession crises face heightened risks of miscommunication, targeting errors, and strategic drift. 85%, 5%. The economic pressures accelerating from this conflict compound the military strategic calculations. Oil prices crossing $115 per barrel represent more than market volatility. They signal fundamental disruption to global energy supply chains that affects every economy dependent on Gulf crude. 90%, 0%. Asian markets already facing supply constraints from Hormuz closure are recalibrating long-term energy security strategies. European manufacturers reliant on stable fuel costs are confronting production slowdowns. American consumers watching gasoline prices surge are creating domestic political pressure that constrains White House operational flexibility. This convergence of military escalation, leadership transition, and economic disruption creates conditions where neither side can achieve decisive victory through purely military means. The question becomes whether political leadership in Tehran, Jerusalem, and Washington recognizes this reality before the human and economic costs become unsustainable. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your support. Join the discussion in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Who do you think is winning the war? Do you think the war is getting out of hand? Let me know. And please subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated. And click the video on the screen to see another. I'll see you soon.